I'm not a very formal guy, so I might just sit here and not stand up here for very long. But I was just going to try and do something different tonight, with your permission. Last time I was here, I don't know, a year or two ago, I spoke to you guys, I spoke pretty much the whole time. What I'd like to do this time is I'm going to tell you about who I am, my background, how I got into this business, and after that, just leave it open to questions, because it's always kind of more interesting for you guys, to see what's on your mind, and see if I can answer it for you. But as Chris said, I'm actually originally from Eastern Washington. I was born and raised in Yakima. Went to the west side. Went to the University of Washington. My story is I was an athlete. I was an athlete at the University of Washington. I graduated with an honors psychology degree and really didn't know what I wanted to do with that. So I went to law school just to put off life for 3 more years and hopefully figure out what I wanted to be. And when I was in law school, my kind of turning point in my career was I was working in a downtown Seattle law firm, and my boss took me out to lunch one day and asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And the politically correct answer was, I want to be like you. I want to be a corporate attorney, make tons of money, and do nothing. But instead I said, sports is my passion. And if I could ever combine sports and law, that would be kind of a neat thing. And that's all that was said. And just a few weeks later, my boss, so this is, before you were born, this is 1989. My boss was friends with a gentleman in Seattle named Kenny Easley. And Kenny was a Seattle Seahawk from 1980 to 88. In 88, he had kidney failure. And in 89, 2 of his teammates asked him to be their agent. Kenny had been player rep for the Seahawks for 8 years, which is a liaison between the players and the ownership. Very smart, bright guy. Kenny had no interest in being an agent. And the story kind of goes like this. Kenny was, you may have heard of a big-time agent in his day. He isn't anymore, but back in the 80s, there was an agent out there named Lee Steinberg, and Lee was the man. At one time, Lee represented every starting quarterback in the NFL. He was the man. Kenny was his second client. And in 1988, when he had kidney failure, he did not hear from Lee for 9 months, and it killed him because he thought they were friends. And so Kenny never really, he's not a fan of agents. And so when he was doing this for his buddies, and he went to my boss and said, I'm going to negotiate these contracts for my former teammates, but I'd like you to overlook the contract, make sure that my T's are crossed. My boss told Kenny, who were friends, said, I have no interest in being with athletes. Cameron's a law student. He knows contract law. Introduced us, and that's how I got in the business. And so Kenny really didn't want to get into this business, but as an eager, excited, young second law student, this is something that was really interesting to me. So I approached Kenny and I said, I know you don't want to do this full time. I do. And we've been working together now since 1989. So that's how I got in the business, which is pretty rare, because that's one question that people often ask is, how do you get in the business? I don't know the exact number right now, but there used to be up to 3,600 registered NFL agents in America for roughly 220 draftable players a year. So it's very competitive. And so of those number of agents, there's probably only 400 agents that actually have clients. Everyone else is trying to get their first player. And so the question is, how do you get those players? Well, I often tell the young, eager agents that are out there knocking on doors, either you have to have a best friend that is Connor Halliday, or you have to have a good relationship, that someone's willing to trust you with their career out of the blocks if you have no clients. Because one of the first things in my business that an athlete or their parents ask is, who do you represent? So you can kind of see just in the past 3 years the trickle-down theory that I've had, fortunately, at this university. And that's 3 years ago, I was fortunate enough to get Jeff Toole and Marquise Wilson. And Jeff is with the Buffalo Bills, Marquise is with the Chicago Bears. And there's tons of reports out there about ranking players, right? You can find the top 20 tailbacks in the country, et cetera. Well, I don't even look at those. I ask my players. So when I'm sitting with Marquise and Jeff when they were in Orlando, Florida training for the Combine, I said, who's good at your school? And they said, well, there's a kid coming out next year named Dayon Buchanan. He's good. You should meet him. Get the phone number, start the relationship. When I'm working with Dayon, who's good next year? Vince Maley. He's a player. So I've been fortunate to represent all those guys in the last 3 years out of this university. So the reason I'm here today, besides Chris, is yesterday was Eastern Washington's Pro Day. And a Pro Day is when NFL teams come through the school. Anyone who's a senior can work out. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that shouldn't be working out for NFL teams because they don't have a dream, but no one's going to shut them down. But yesterday was Eastern Washington's Pro Day, and I have an offensive lineman there. And then today was Washington State's Pro Day. And Vince has a broken hand, but he was there. I wasn't there to watch him. I was here originally thinking he was going to work out, but Idaho also had their Pro Day today, and I represent a young man from Idaho too. And so as you can kind of see from my background and my clients, my guys are in the Northwest. That's one thing that we kind of focused on early on is I don't go to California, Texas, Florida, recruiting college football players. Our company is kind of a smaller boutique group. You know, we hover around 15 NFL clients at a time. We're, I would say, a boutique group in the sense that there are 3 different really type of agencies out there. You got the factories, the Lee Steinbergs, the companies that have 30 to 180 players under their roof. Then you've got companies like myself, which hover between 10 and 20, and then you got guys with 1 or 2, just starting out or trying to get into it. And we've just kind of, you know, because of Kenny's relationship with Lee and how it hurt him, our style has always been, we're going to represent just 2 or 3 young men every year. We're going to do a bang-up job for them. We're going to give them all the attention they need. We're going to do, we do tons of work. If you ever look up our website and stuff, we do nonprofits. I'm an attorney. I do legal work for all my guys. It's a hands-on full-time gig, and it's been great. So that's kind of my background and how I got in the business and the style of our company. You guys have any questions about that? Okay. Let me see. I could talk to you guys about anything you want to talk about. Collective bargaining agreement, players, NCAA sanctions, for days. Yeah?
So obviously I helped the agency with all that.
It did.
Has there been anything that you've been hiring your clients for?
I had one free agent this year. His name is Michael Person. He's an offensive tackle from Montana State. He's just finished his 4th year. He was a 7th-round draft pick 4 years ago to San Francisco 49ers. He was there for a year. He then was with the Seattle Seahawks, his second and half of his 3rd year. And then in the middle of his 3rd year, he was released, picked up off the waiver wire by the Rams. So he's been with the St. Louis Rams for the last year and a half. It was, to give you a quick story, free agency is what players live for. That is, you get to that second contract, and that's when you get paid. Paid the big bucks that your grandchildren are going to be wealthy. So, unfortunately for Michael Person, it didn't kind of work out that big of a lucrative deal. But he is a guy that is a solid player. He's a utility guy. He's just a big guy from Glendive, Montana, that loves football and loves hunting. And he has never started a game in 4 years. He's a utility guy. He's a backup. He can play center, guard, and tackle. So he's very valuable to a team. In case there's an injury, he takes 3 spots. So that's 3 salaries that would just pay 1 guy. So he's valuable in that sense. And so I was actually in Indianapolis at the Combine a month or so back, and I got a call from the Denver Broncos. And they asked me if I was in town. I said yes. They invited me up to a suite where they were hanging out, and I walked up there thinking they were going to ask me about a big free agency I had this year, a guy named Michael Roos, left tackle out of the Tennessee Titans. But I thought they wanted to ask me about him and to see what his thought process was. But they actually, I walked into this room. It was really kind kind of interesting. I walk into this room, and it was like the top 5 brass of the Denver Broncos, including John Elway. And I wanted to kind of turn around and see if I could ask for a selfie, but I didn't think it was the time to do that. And so we just talked, and they wanted to talk about Mike Person. So I was starting to get some interest in Mike like 2 months ago. The Rams were kind of interested in him, but they weren't in love with him. But there was an old assistant coach at the Seattle Seahawks that was a fan of Mike Person's, that is now the O-line coach of the Atlanta Falcons. And so Atlanta had been calling me for the last couple of weeks saying, hey, just letting you know we're interested. And I said, great. And so 2 days before free agency opens up, the Falcons are calling me, and they're saying, we want to do a deal. And I said, give me your number. You know, and the thing about in my business is they always try to work you. They always try to think you're stupid. And so they're asking me for numbers. You know, what is it going to take? What's it going to take to sign Mike Person? And it wasn't the general manager. It was just a young assistant GM kind of guy. And I said, you know, I've been doing this for 25 years. I'm not stupid. You give me your numbers, and I'll let you know what we think. So they never gave me numbers. And the day before free agency opens up, I call Denver Broncos. Hey, are you guys interested? No. Changed their mind. They passed. I called the St. Louis Rams. Are you interested? And they said, yeah, we're interested, but we see him as a backup. So, you know, if you get better offers, you might want to take it. So I go back to Atlanta, and I do what all good agents do, and I say, man, we got 3 teams that want him bad. and I said, as I negotiate free agency contracts, you know, in the sense that I say, I'm not going to negotiate. This is not going to be a negotiation. You just tell me what you're willing to pay, and I'm not going to come back. So you just tell me what you're going to pay, and I'll let you know if you have a deal or not. And so it was pretty interesting. They came at me. Well, Denver had passed. St. Louis Rams offered me a $50,000 signing bonus and bases of $710 and $845 for a 2-year deal. The Falcons offered me a $300,000 signing bonus and 3-year bases of $1 million, 1.1, 1.2 for a 3-year deal. And I just went back to him and I said, you know, I got 2 offers here. I said, it's not going to be enough. I told you that I wasn't going to come back, but Mike Person really likes this coach that you have on the Falcons. He wants to play for him. Can you do 5? Do a $500,000 signing bonus. And they said yes. So he just signed yesterday with the Atlanta Falcons for that. That's the only free agency deal that I had. So.
Kind of cool to see from your perspective how that can go.
Yeah, sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. You know, every once in a while teams check. So they could have called the Rams, or they could have called Denver and said, you really offering this guy this kind of money type thing? It's happened to me before, but they've been real contract offers. But yeah.
What do you think of like the legal tampering period that they have in previous to that? Like the 2 days where they can like negotiate contracts but not really sign them?
Yeah, well, they're not. I don't know, you know, the logistics of that, but I know that teams were given notices like a day or 2 before, because you heard it, like I heard it. You heard Dominican Sue signing with the Miami Dolphins 3 days before free agency opened up. Well, all the teams kind of got their hands slapped, saying, "Stop this! You are not supposed to be doing this until 4 p.m. Eastern time on that day." Well, it's the NFL. They kind of do what they want to do, and they ask for permission later. But you know, I think that memo went out to all the teams, and it did scare them a little bit because, for instance, Mike Person, I agreed to that deal before free agency opened up, and they told him, go to the airport at 3 o'clock in St. Louis time, which is 4 o'clock Eastern time, and at 3:05, tell him to go to the counter because there will be an airline ticket waiting for him in his name to fly to Atlanta. And so they were playing by the rules now. Because you can't book an airline ticket obviously until the 4 o'clock time frame. So the teams, I think, cleaned it up after they got their hands slapped, but you'll see it again next year. Unless they're going to penalize them with draft picks. Then that'll get the NFL's attention. If they take away draft picks for doing something improper, then that might get their attention. So that's that. What do you guys want to talk about, Chris? Is there anything in particular, any areas?
Can you talk about NFL contracts? The
Okay, that's like 4 questions. You got to throw them one at a time at me.
I was thinking,
It's been a long day.
it's a topic that I touch on, you know, in class.
So give me your first question.
So, what happens when say, Dayon's got a 4-year rookie contract,
Mhm.
right? And for some reason, Arizona decides to release him next year. He's not performing.
Big mistake.
They do.
Okay.
What happens?
Well,
Play out.
NFL contracts are not guaranteed, typically. Asterisks with that. Major League Baseball, NBA, those are guaranteed contracts. Football are not, until you see Russell Wilson's here soon. I'm sure his is going to be 100% guaranteed, which is rare. There's only been 5 guaranteed contracts in the NFL. I did one in 1995 for Napoleon Kaufman, a running back out of the University of Washington. But they're pretty rare. When you see contracts typically that say, well, it is changing, but before this last couple of years, before the new collective bargaining agreement 3 years ago, when you heard a $10 million contract and $2 million was guaranteed, that means there's signing bonus. Okay, it's not really guaranteed. It means they have it in their pocket already, so they're not going to lose it, right? So rarely did you have guaranteed money, you know, year 2, year 3. Dayon Buchanan's contract, you know, when you're a first-round draft pick, it's a little different story. But with Dayon Buchanan's contract, as Chris said, in the NFL, to kind of give you a little background, in the NFL, if you are, prior to the new collective bargaining agreement, agents could be idiots. Agents could negotiate 12-year contracts. They could do whatever they really wanted to. The new collective bargaining agreement handcuffed agents from being idiots. They basically did our job for us. So there's really not a negotiation anymore for rookie contracts. So if you are a first-round draft pick now, it's a 4-year contract with an option. So it could be a 5-year deal, period. No negotiation. If you're a drafted player, 2nd to 7th round draft pick, it's a 4-year contract. No more negotiation. If you're a free agent, it's a 3-year contract. No more negotiation. So that's the terms. And they've even gone so far as they've already figured out the rookie salary caps. So immediately after the draft, I get a document that says Dayon Buchanan's rookie salary for his first season is going to range between, on the salary cap number, like $1.4 to $1.5 million. That's his salary cap. So they've already told you what his salary is. So kind of how that works is if you take the minimum, which is $425 last year, $420,000, you take that out of the cap, so you got roughly $1 million left, times 4, because you can prorate signing bonuses for 4 years. So that's his signing bonus, $4 million, with keeping his. So there's really no magic to it anymore. There's no negotiation powerhouse out there anymore. You just have to follow the rules, because the numbers are given to you, and you can't really sway from them, and the teams are not going to let you sway from them. Negotiating power now, at least having a competent agent, what the important level is for your second contract, because then there's no rules. You can do whatever you want. And just thinking back on that process, back before the new collective bargaining agreement, you would see contracts out there that would range from 12 years. You know, remember Ricky Williams, running back? He had a 12-year contract. Why? Because a rapper did it. His agent was a guy named Master P. Master P was his agent. Why do agents do that? Because if Ricky Williams wakes up after year 2, like he did, and fires his agent, the player has to pay the agent for the length of the contract negotiated. So it's in the agent's best interest to lock him down, right? It's in the player's best interest to do a short contract. That's why the new collective bargaining agreement stopped agents from being idiots. So, yeah. Geno Smith? Oh, yeah, that's sad. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I've been blessed in the sense that, again, being small and having personal service with our players, I have relationships. Like, for instance, Vince Maley, when we're done today, we're driving to Seattle tonight, and he's living with me for until the 1st, until he comes back here and training in Seattle. So I am close to my guys. They're part of my family, really. And in 25 years, I've been fired 3 times, which isn't too shabby in this industry. And if any agent tells you they haven't been fired, they're not a real agent. But yeah, unfortunately that happens. And in that scenario, if an agent was fired prior to the player earning any income, there are legal ramifications for that. You can go after the new agent for tortious interference with business relations, because you know that Gino just didn't wake up and say, I don't like you. It's because, again, in this industry, it's very competitive. I've got agents and every one of my players on a weekly basis saying, what's Cameron doing for you? Do you like him? Is he doing his job? It's very ugly out there. It's a very competitive business. And so you have to have a good relationship with your guys, or you're going to lose them. So this is probably what happened to Gino. The other legal term is unjust enrichment. So it's illegal in America for a player to take money from someone under the assumption he's going to get paid back. So Gino's old agent could sue Gino for whatever expense he has put out for him in training or money or cars or whatever he bought him. Gino owes that old agent back. He can't just walk away from that and take it from the new guy, because there was an expectation of a business relationship there. So he would be able to be reimbursed for all of his expenses, but he sure isn't going to get his contract money. So that's how that would work.
So Russell Wilson firing his agent last year to bring his baseball in on his head. So then he had to pay out whatever percentage he had negotiated with his football.
Exactly.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever percentage even for this year and what would be next year on his contract, right?
Whatever contract that was negotiated. So Russell Wilson had a 4-year deal because he was a 4th-round draft pick, I believe. 3rd or 4th. Okay. And so he's got a 4-year deal. And so he just finished his 3rd year. So part of the new collective bargaining agreement also is you cannot renegotiate your contracts until you've completed your 3rd year. So he just completed his 3rd year. He now can renegotiate his contract. And he is. So he owes his first agent this contract value that he negotiated, which is minimum salary. So Russell Wilson is scheduled to make, I believe, $700,000 next year. So his old agent gets 3% of that. His new agent will get 3% of $120 million, or whatever he negotiates. Yeah.
How's it working?
Bad time to be fired. Bad timing.
How's it working in the NFL? I used to give in class. I used to give a Seahawks contract out to the students. I quit doing that because it's a little older, so I was just using it as an example. How's it
Remind me, I'll mail you a couple.
how's it currently worded? How's the termination clause worded?
Termination for what? For a team terminating a player?
Team terminating a player. How does that
Teams can terminate players at any time. There's
worded as just cause, or is on-field performance worded?
They typically say on-field performance. They're releasing you for on-field, or unless you did something stupid, you can also be fired for detrimental acts, DWIs, fighting, spousal abuse. You can be terminated for that, and if you're terminated, your contract is over right there and then. They don't owe you a penny if you've done something bad. Now, if a team releases you at any time as well, you still, like for instance, let me see if I can give you an example. Corey Toomer, former University of Idaho football player, 5th-round draft pick to the Seattle Seahawks a few years back. Corey was with the Seahawks for 2 years. He was with the Dallas Cowboys. After the end of the Super Bowl championship season, into the preseason, they released him. The Dallas Cowboys picked him up. He played for the Dallas Cowboys for about 5 weeks, and unfortunately got in a fight with DeMarco Murray on the field. And it wasn't a nice fight. And so he was terminated the next day. And he was then immediately picked up the following day by the St. Louis Rams, but put on the practice squad. Now, are you guys familiar with that stuff, practice squads and regular contracts? Okay. So he could have been, he was let go, and they didn't owe him a penny. And then he went onto a practice squad where you make roughly $6,300 a week. as opposed to $34,000 a week. And he was there for a few weeks, and then they activated him, and now he's still with the Rams playing there. But no, there is you can be released for any reason by an NFL team, and they don't owe you a penny. If you are released injured, that's when you have problems. An athlete cannot be released if they are injured. They'll try many different ways of cutting this up. They can release you, and then a player can file a grievance within 15 days saying, I was wrongly terminated, which happens often. Or typically what happens is, another example is a safety from University of Wyoming named Chris Brzezinski. Chris Brzezinski was a 4th-round pick about 4 years ago to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Chris played for 4 years, and during his 4th season, he ripped his bicep really bad. And he was out, well, he was just injured. Chris was not a fan of his team. He wanted to get off of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so we saw this as an opportunity. So I went to the NFL team because they couldn't release him because he's now injured. So I went to the team and I said, hey, I'll tell you what, let's do an injury settlement. Injury settlements are when you have an injury that their doctor, the team doctor, Jacksonville Jaguars, says, Chris Brzezinski's got a torn bicep. We think it's a 6-week injury, meaning if within 6 weeks, in our doctor's opinion, we believe he will be ready to play again. Well, they actually said 4. I had a second opinion from another doctor, and our doctor said 6 weeks. So I went to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I said, I'll tell you what, why don't you pay him 6 weeks of his salary? And this is what an injury settlement is. So it's, whatever the weekly salary is times 6, you get a big check, and you sign release forms, and he basically says goodbye. They're letting you go out of your contract, and they're giving you a chunk of change, and there's no repercussions to come back, even if your injury doesn't heal. That's the risk. That's why I'm not a fan of injury grievances, but Chris knows his body. He felt he was going to be healthy in a couple weeks, and he saw this as an opportunity to change teams. So within about 3 weeks, he was healthy, and he's now with the Philadelphia Eagles. He signed 3 weeks later to the Philadelphia Eagles, on a team that he loves, and is getting paid. So there's the injury thing is an issue where a player cannot be released if you are injured, unless you agree to it in an injury settlement. Yeah.
Do we put in contracts, like if a player's not happy with his team, he's on, so if they want to leave, but they have a contract for like next 2 years after that, can you get out of that?
Nope. Nope, these are men. And if you don't like your team, that's too bad. But unfortunately, you see whiners out there, right? You see the Marshawn Lynches out there saying, oh my gosh, I'm not getting paid enough. So they do stuff. They claim they're going to retire. They claim they're going to have problems, and or they're going to hold out. And you see that every year. You see players holding out because they feel they're not compensated correctly. As an attorney, I don't believe in that. I believe a contract is a contract. And if you're being, if you negotiated a contract and this guy is now a starter and he's not making starter salary, well, that's what you have to live with, in my opinion. I don't believe you then sit the guy and say, pay us more. There are agents that do that. Most agents, I would say, do that. But I just don't, I think that's wrong, because I'm not going to go to if a player is playing and he's on the bench, I'm not going to go to him and say, hey, let's give him a little less. He's not really living up to his salary. So it kind of can go both ways, and so I don't believe in that, but it happens all the time. Yes?
I just say I think that's another reason why it's a new collective bargaining agreement, especially for younger players. They can't hold out anyway if they can't negotiate a higher contract.
Right.
Okay.
Right, that's true. Or obviously Russell Wilson would have been doing this 2 years ago. Yes?
For coaches' contracts, if they fire them before they're like years out or however long they're there, and do they continue to pay them until the contract's up or like until they sign with another team?
Are you talking about Leach?
No.
Oh.
Talking about Dennis Erickson leaving the 49ers with 3 years left on the contract. Remember that?
Yeah, it depends on the contract terms. If Jim Mora. Yeah, well, depending how it's, every contract's different. This is why coaches have agents as well. Depending on the contract, if you are just terminated because you're not performing, then they typically have to pay you the length of your contract. If you do something, again, just like an indie contract, if you get a DWI, if you do something that's detrimental to the team, they then could terminate you for cause and just say goodbye and not pay you anything, which is difficult. Most coaches' contracts are pretty well protected. The coaching industry, excuse me, it's one of the most difficult industries, in my opinion, out there, because you're only as good as your previous year. So it's very volatile. So coaching contracts, they realize they're not stupid. When they get a contract, they want to be sure that they are locked down and golden for the length of the term they negotiate. So usually, if a coach is terminated, they just bring on a new coach. Remember what happened here with Paul Wolf. Paul Wolf's contract was terminated, and they still owed him a year. And so they actually paid Paul a check. They wrote him a check for his full last year's salary and said goodbye. And then they brought Leach in. So that's typically how it works. Yeah?
How does guaranteed money work? Like, if you are traded, does the guaranteed money come from like the team that you're originally on, or does that like just fall into the?
Yep. If you are traded, that new team assumes your contract, good and bad. Whatever, it's just, even though that contract says St. Louis Rams and you're now a Seattle Seahawk, you don't do a new contract. That St. Louis Rams contract is now ingrained into the Seahawks contract. So there really is no clauses there. Going back to the guaranteed portion, for instance, Dayon Buchanan, if you remind me, I'll send you Dayon's contract if you want to use it for future. Dayon's contract is kind of fun in that he has a 4-year contract, and the only thing that agents can, because now you know that the negotiations have already been done for us. So the only thing we can argue about now is guarantees. So first rounders now are getting guaranteed contracts, not entirely, but like Dayon's first 3 years are guaranteed. So if he were to fall off a cliff or die in a hang gliding accident, his estate would receive this next 3 years' salary. So there are some guarantees still out there, primarily just for first rounders. But like the first pick, the first 3 picks, their 4 years are guaranteed. When you're getting middle round, first round, like Dayon, 3 years guaranteed. Late first round, 2 years guaranteed. You hit the second round, no guarantees. Yes.
How does teams make more capital as far as like the restructuring goes? Is this taking like a base salary and then turning it into a signing bonus that's spread out? Or
No, they just do new contracts. Who just did that? There was Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning just restructured his from 19 to 14, I think it was. That was really gentlemanish of him. But yeah, so he all they did is they just ripped up his old contract and did a new contract. And so that just opens up $4 million cap. Or you release players. That's what most teams have been doing in the past 2 weeks, is releasing players, which is opening up $10 to $15 to $20 million in cap room, and then they can go after new players. Yes?
Kind of a two-part question. How important have you found your law degree for being a sport agent, and if you don't go into that, can you still be successful without?
Yeah, back when I started this, when I first became an agent in 1989, the rules to be an agent were you needed a pulse and $1,200, and then anyone could be an agent. That's probably how Master P became an agent. But today you actually, today you actually have to have a master's degree, something postgraduate to be an agent. To be my law background, I think, is critical. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to have a law degree to be an agent. But I think when in the courting process, if you're courting parents, if you're dealing with people, it's a little bit more relaxing to them, because in my profession, if I do something improper, let's say I give a young man cash, or I do something that's an NCAA violation, he is sanctioned heavily. His team is forfeiting games, they're losing scholarships, he's immediately a professional athlete. It's severe on that side. For an agent, I lose my license for a year. I can't be an agent for a year. Well, Rip-de-ding-dong. I got other players I'm earning an income off of, and I'll just take a year hiatus and I'll come back next year. So there really is a huge void between the parity of repercussions. As an attorney, though, if I do something wrong, not only am I going to lose my bar license, I have breached fiduciary relationships that attorneys are supposed to have with their clients. So attorneys have higher standards that they have to follow, which I would think it should be important to parents and to kids, but unfortunately it's not. You know, you're going to see a lot of players out there signing with guys that shouldn't be in this business, but it happens all the time. This profession that I work for in is, if you look at my roster, if you look at my guys, I have no high maintenance young men. My guys are good, honorable, honest, hardworking kids. Unfortunately, that's not always the case in the NFL. You've got a lot of high maintenance egos. And I just made a decision years ago that I'm not going to deal with that. Life's too short to do stuff, like to be treated that way, I guess you would say. And so I've just, I meet kids usually about like a year before, like the summer before their senior year, and I get to know them a little bit. And if I see they're going to be a nuisance or a problem to me, I just stop communicating with them. So I've been fortunate in that case that we can kind of pick and choose who we represent. Again, because we're only looking for 2 or 3 guys a year. So, yes, sir.
So what exactly are the steps to become a certified NFL agent?
They're on the NFLPA.com website, all of the rules and regulations. But how it works, you have to take a test, a written test on the collective bargaining agreement. And it's offered, I think, twice a year. I think the next time it's being offered is in July. But you have to sit for a test. You pay your $1,200. You sit for a test. If you pass the test, which is a pretty high passing rate test, what they're now doing is they're now requiring agents to have insurance, malpractice insurance. And even though you're an attorney and you may have attorney malpractice insurance, it doesn't matter. They still want you to get their agent malpractice insurance, which is roughly $3,000 a year. So really the purpose of that, in my opinion, it's not really trying to protect the NFL player. It's just, again, another level that's weeding out agents that don't have clients. Because if you're paying $3,000 for insurance and all this stuff every year, you're going to go backwards pretty quick if you don't have a client. And there's also a new rule in agencies that if you don't negotiate an NFL contract in 2 years, your license expires. You have to start over. So that's another kind of hurdle they're making, trying to get rid of agents that are trying to get their first player. So, yes, sir. They're very similar. Yeah, one of my first clients was an NBA player. But again, you can be certified. If you don't have a criminal background, the most important thing they check for is for fraud cases. If you have a criminal background where you stole money, it's going to be difficult to become one because we have a great opportunity to take advantage of these players. Agents do, and unfortunately you hear about it. Not only agents, but financial planners that do this because these young men trust you. And I've done this for so long in the sense that, for instance, Dayon and Vince, they consider me like a father figure to them, and they trust me, and it's very easy to take advantage of these kids if you really wanted to. But again, you're going to do it once, and then you're not going to have any more clients. So it's just kind of how you take care of that. But did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
How does working with collegiate athletes that are about to enter the draft, how does that work alongside NCAA compliance regulations?
Like once they're done, you mean, with their college career?
Representing them while they're still.
You don't. It's once a college athlete signs with an agent, they are then a professional athlete, and they are no longer a amateur athlete anymore. That's in the NCAA rules and regulations. It's pretty simple. A student athlete, if he agrees verbally or in writing to representation, he's done an NCAA boo-boo. If he accepts anything of value, that's also an NCAA violation. So those are really the only things. You can sit, you can talk, you can have conversations with athletes, their parents. No NCAA violations. You give them a ride. You know, the NCAA rules really were originally written in the 1940s for vehicles. You can't give a guy a car. Well, it's now a can of Coke, a car ride. Those are of value, and those will get a player in trouble. And now, you've really seen it here, everywhere. In the past 5 to 10 years, colleges are taking this step even further. So they're not leaving it up to the NCAA to govern their players. Universities are. So, like for instance, in Oregon, you have to be registered with the state. You have to pay a fine. Well, Texas, that's a funny one. I just did this one a few months ago. You have to pay $1,200 for a bond. You have to be bonded. You have to be licensed before you can even step foot on a campus in Texas to speak to a young man. And then that's the state governance. So this has got NCAA, state, and then university. Then you have to register with university. You have to let them know, you have to fill out their forms. And again, it's a little criminal background check to make sure that you're not a bad guy. So that's kind of the process. But once you sign with an agent, you're still a student. You can still be a student. And so typically how it works is a young man will, depending on their talent level, typically what they do as soon as even their college football career is over, they go to some place and train. They train for the NFL Combine and for their pro days. And that costs lots of money. So that's when the agent steps in, and we pay for all of their expenses pretty much January, February, and March. However, typically also, if they do the right move, they stay enrolled and they take classes online. So that way they can keep their scholarship check. Unfortunately, a lot of universities don't want that to happen because they're holding a scholarship position. They want that player out so they can give a new young man a scholarship. So you kind of have to, as an agent, you kind of become the father figure, and I have to argue with a lot of universities on what's right and what's wrong, and usually we win. But so once they sign with you, it's the agent taking care of them, and then you just kind of wait. Like for example, for Vince Maley. Vince Maley is a wonderful young man, great kid, very quiet, very shy. Doesn't have a whole lot of people in his life, he went to the Senior Bowl. Oh, after he signed with me, he went to Orlando, Florida to train, where he's been training for the past 2.5 months. And he went to the Senior Bowl, and at the Senior Bowl, he didn't know it, but he broke his thumb. He thought he sprained his thumb really bad in catching a ball in the game. But he kept going, and then he goes to the NFL Combine, which was roughly 4 weeks ago. And the NFL Combine, every NFL team has their own team doctor there. And you are MRI'd, you are x-rayed from head to toe. And they found out that his right thumb was fractured, and he didn't know it. And so they wouldn't let him bench press. But Vince is about as tough as they come. And he caught the ball. He did all of the receiving drills. He ran the 40. And I was just telling Chris earlier, if you look at his film, he's right-handed. And typically when you do a track start, you put your right hand down and your left hand up. Well, he couldn't put weight on his right hand. And he never practiced the other way. So at the Combine, he ran left-handed, which hurt him. He did not run the fastest 40 time that he could have run there. If I was there, I said, shut it down and don't do anything. But he ran, and it wasn't the fastest. But, it shows teams that you're a warrior. He gets the Tough Guy Award at the NFL Combine this year because he had a broken hand and performed well. But he came back to Pullman. He's now in a cast. He did not need surgery, and he gets his cast off on the 20th. And his pro day was today, and he was there, but all he did was get measured, height and weight, and didn't do anything. And so as the agent now, I've marketed him to every NFL team saying, Vince Mailey will be here April 1st, and he will run on April 1st without his cast off, so or with his cast off. So that's the process, kind of draft. And then from there, it's a waiting game. Now you got the draft at the end of April, and you know, young men come to me saying, what should I be doing? What should I be doing? And I said, you know, now is the time to take up knitting, golfing, work on the swing. Just don't think of football, because these guys just go crazy. If you can imagine, they've been dreaming about this since they were this big, and they're 1 month away from realizing their dream, and they go crazy. And so you really have to distract them. Yes?
So they've recently been putting back the NFL draft until later.
They have.
Is that expected in the
Yeah, it's made it a lot more expensive because I'm taking care of them longer. No, it's just, you know, the NFL draft is, or the NFL is all about money. And it's all about the show and getting the ratings. And they turned it into a one-day event to a three-day event. It is one of the highest grossing watched television shows. And this is just a draft. So NFL is are marketing geniuses. But no, it really doesn't matter with respect to a player, because the season doesn't start still till later. It just gives them more time just to hang out and relax and recoup. So, yes?
You marketed out to Hollywood Dolphins. It was brought up about one kid who jumped 47 inches vertical, but not at the NFL combine. It was at the combine or a workout that the Denver Broncos did.
Okay.
Were you aware of that? Like, how did that?
He wouldn't do, it's illegal for players to work out for teams, like for Denver Broncos.
At the Denver facility. It was multiple, like a second type of NFL combine.
Okay, I think you're talking like a regional combine. Okay, so there's a new thing, not new thing, it's been out there for a while, but only in the last 3 years the NFL put their name on it, and it's called regional combines, and it's really a good thing. Regional combines, because, you know, only roughly, you know, 220 players are invited to the NFL combine, and that's usually, like, depending on the position, but there's only about maybe 20 to 25 players per position are invited to that combine to compete against one another. But there's a lot of talent out there that do not go. I actually, I don't know if it was an honor or not, but I got a call a few years back from CBS Sports saying our agency has the most NFL players drafted that did not go to the NFL combine. So I took that as a compliment, because it just shows you the hard work. You're right, there are other ways of getting noticed. As I was mentioning earlier about this young man from Wyoming named Chris Brzezinski. Chris was a guy that did not have, you know, there was a couple bowl games. You got the Senior Bowl, you got the East-West Shrine game, the NFLPA game, or the kind of the senior showcase bowl games that these kids can go be seen by teams and studied. Chris didn't do any of those. He didn't, he went to Wyoming. He wasn't a high-profile athlete. He trained really hard. He was a good athlete, obviously, just to be where he was, but he goes to his pro day, and he blows it up. He had like a 42-inch, and this is a white safety. He blows it up. He has a 42-inch vertical. He has an 11.2 broad jump. He runs a 3.7, I'm saying a 4.37, 4.38. All of a sudden, teams are going, we made a mistake. This kid should have been at the combine. So all of a sudden, my phone blows up, and he's taken to teams. When the rules are, if each NFL teams has 30 visits. So if the Seattle Seahawks can invite 30 players in the country at different times from now to the draft to come visit. The visit just means they can physical them, they can put them on a whiteboard to see what kind of intelligence they have. They cannot work them out. But it's kind of like recruiting. They meet the coaches, they see what kind of a person he is. The only place an NFL team can watch a college athlete work out is at his high school or his college. So now, in the last few years, these regional combines have come out as like a supplemental level for the second round of good athletes to maybe go to. And it's a good thing. There's probably about 12 of them around the country. And another quick story on that is a University of Idaho young man named Benson Mayowa. Benson was a guy that was an average football player in college. He was good, but he wasn't consistent. I believe he had like 3 sacks in a row against Hawaii, in a row, consecutive plays, and then he didn't get a tackle for 3 games later. So he's very inconsistent, so obviously teams don't like that. But Benson's a big guy, a phenomenal athlete, and he didn't have any post-game games, NFL Combine. So he went to the Seattle Regional Combine. They're usually held, like you said, at NFL facilities around the country. He goes to the Seattle Seahawks Regional Combine, which means if you're interested, if an NFL team has a scout, they want to go there, they can send them there and they can watch. And they do the exact same drills as they do at the NFL Combine. Well, Benson went there and performed phenomenally. And he wasn't drafted, but the Seahawks liked him. And they brought him in as a free agent. And not only did he make the team that rookie year, but he was active for 53 on the 53-man roster. Last year, they then released him after his first year. He was picked up last year by the Oakland Raiders and started 6 games. So he's doing very well for himself right now, and he probably would not be in the NFL today, but for that regional combine. So they're a value out there, yeah. So to answer your question, if a young man blows it up on his pro day, like if 47-inch vert is unheard of. Do you guys know what that means? They measure, and then it's 47 feet off the ground, 47 inches off the ground that his feet are at. It's tall. These guys, that guy would have some amazing jumps. But just because you're a freak athletically doesn't always make you a football player. And that's what a lot of teams, the Oakland Raiders have not figured this out. The Oakland Raiders will always take the fastest guy, no matter what. If he's fast, we're going to draft him. Well, it doesn't always work out that way. You need football players. As an example, I was at Eastern Washington's pro day yesterday. They have 2 running backs there. One of them is a good running back. He was their starting running back, and he performed very poorly. He's a good football player. He's not a good tester. He bench pressed 7 times. The bench press test, he performed poorly. The backup tailback there ran a 4.3, had a 38-inch vert, was a phenomenal numbers. But if I was a coach, I'd take this guy over here who performed worse at the pro day because I've seen him on the football field and I know what he can do. So those numbers help, at least get your name up there, but then once they see that, then they go look at film. And if the film doesn't back up the stats, they're going to pass on you anyways.
I hate to change gears. No, I love it. I mean, all this football talk is great. Can you touch base on off the field?
Off the field?
Yeah.
Yes.
Kind of let these kids know what it is you're doing and why you're doing it?
Oh, the nonprofit? Yes. One thing, I've been in this, as I said, this business for so long. One of the first things that I did that kind of really grabbed my attention, I was a 3rd-year law student, and we were representing a Seattle Supersonic named Dale Ellis. He's before your time, but Dale Ellis was with the Seattle Supersonics, and he and my partner, Kenny Easley, were buddies. Let me, before I forget here. These are 2, if you guys want to pass those around, those are some brochures on our company if you just want to look at who I am also and other stuff. But Kenny and Dale were buddies, and so Dale hired us to clean up his image. And you guys don't remember this, but back in roughly 1990, Dale had a spousal abuse and a DWI in the same week in Seattle. And he was traded to the Milwaukee Bucks. He got rid of him. Dale hired us to clean up his image. Dale hired us. I was a 3rd-year law student. I took a month off of law school, not highly recommended. I went and I lived with Dale in his condo in Milwaukee, and I created the Dale Ellis Foundation. And it was all for the wrong reasons. It was basically to make this guy look like a saint in Milwaukee. Dale is a wonderful man, but he had made some mistakes. And walking around Milwaukee as a 3rd-year law student, and just for my first real experience, seeing not just kids but adults in awe of a professional athlete just because he had a great jumper or he was a great, he just had God-given athletic ability. It was my first experience of really noticing this firsthand. And so I remember thinking, man, if I ever make it in this business, I'm going to do this right. And I want to create foundations for all my players and do it for the right reasons. And since doing this, I've created hundreds of nonprofit foundations and 501c3s. And in 25 years, the companies that I've created have raised over $20 million, all for charitable purposes. We don't charge a thing for the work that we do. All the money goes to the cause. And to me, it's always been exciting because you see a great athlete, and he doesn't really understand the power he has off the field. And so they have a really short window of opportunity that they are on a pedestal as a professional athlete, and people will listen to them. So I really encourage my guys to get involved in the community and just to do whatever is passionate about. I've had clients that were adopted that created foundations to help adoption agencies. I've done, whatever they're passionate about is usually what I try to steer them to. And so I've done this for years. Recently, I just kind of, what Chris is talking about, just this past year, I've got Marquise Wilson nonprofit. I got Jeff Toole nonprofit foundations. Well, after a while, what I'm doing now is I created one foundation called Off the Field Foundation, and what I'm now doing is because a year or two ago I had a player audited, and it was just ugly. He was not in trouble, but it was just whenever you're audited, and the long and short of it is it was Michael Roos with the Tennessee Titans. There was a reporter in Tennessee that did a story on Chris Johnson, Delaney Walker, and Michael Roos, three of the highest profile Tennessee Titans. They all had foundations. Well, Chris Johnson and Delaney Walker's foundations weren't even 501c3s. They weren't even federally recognized, and they were saying that they were. So they were in trouble. But when you're not, and Michael Roos was a 501c3. I'm not stupid. I'm not going to put my players in any kind of a risk. And but so because of that, Chris Johnson's and Delaney Walker's, they don't have to file tax returns. They're not 501c3s. So they couldn't go after, they couldn't dig in and see what this company's about. With the Michael Roos Foundation, they did. They dug in and they had a lot of questions about stuff, but it took us like a year of auditing, and we came out fine. Instead of being a 501c3, we're now a 501(c)(29) because most of our funds don't come from the general public. They come from entry fees into events. So they just changed our designation of nonprofit. That's all that happened. But it was an experience I didn't like because you don't want to put a player in that kind of a position, in my opinion. And that was the first time it happened to me. So since then I wised up and I've created a foundation called Off the Field Foundation. And so when we do nonprofit events, we can say the beneficiary is the Deion Buchanan Foundation, but the checks are written to Off the Field Foundation. And then the beneficiary, Off the Field Foundation, will write a check to my players' foundations. Therefore, if we're ever audited, my foundation is going to be audited. And so my players' names will never be in the press. It'll be all about me, and it won't be about them. So it's just kind of another level tier of buffering them for protecting them. Yet they can still have their own foundation. They still have the checkbook. They can still write checks to charitable purposes that they're passionate about. And so that's why I created that one, just because I didn't want any other players to have to go through that experience. Yes?
So you mentioned the level of education that an agent would need to be similar to a master's degree or any type of post-bachelor's?
Any kind of a postgraduate degree, yes.
Okay. So,
And it doesn't matter what it is. Underwater baby stacking.
but the reason why I like that is because there's an organization called Sport Management Worldwide that offers
Yes,
education courses.
I'm familiar with them. Yep, out of Portland.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any agents within your organization that was educated by them? Or?
Nope, you're looking at the agent in my company.
Okay.
I've actually loosened up a little bit in the last few years. In the last few years, I have two daughters that are really into soccer. And so I hired a soccer agent about 5 years ago. And we have about 10 MLS players. One local guy, Lamar Nagel with the Seattle Sounders, is a client of mine. But I have a soccer agent, and just this past year, former Cougar, a guy that I went to high school with named Randy Snyder. Randy was a Washington State athlete, and he played for the Milwaukee Bucks for a few years. I'm sorry, Milwaukee Brewers. And he is now part of our company, and he is just starting a baseball branch of our company. So I am starting to work with other agencies, I guess you could say, under my umbrella. But as I said, this industry is very, very competitive. And the typical story is you bring in a young man, he does good work, you educate him, you teach him the ropes, and he steals your clients. Unfortunately, that happens on a daily basis in my industry. The worst story was Lee Steinberg. At the time, Lee Steinberg, as I said, he represented everybody. Well, his partner was a guy named David Dunn. And David Dunn, one day, woke up, took all of his clients. Lee Steinberg woke up one day with no clients. And it was tragic. Well, obviously terrible for him. Well, Lee sued David Dunn for $50-some million and won. David Dunn has filed bankruptcy. But David Dunn today is one of the biggest agents out there. Excuse me? Did he do Flacco's deal? Probably. He represents a lot of players. So that's kind of the ropes. How it's just kind of the breed of the business. But in this past year, we've had great success for the past 10 years for my company in working, and all of our guys come out of the Northwest. But as I said, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I don't see myself doing this for another 25 years. This is a young man's sport. And I see myself getting out of this, and I'll do this for another 15 years. But I've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this company, and I kind of got the idea from like law firms or dentists or doctors. When that doctor retires, he sells his practice. So in the past year, as you can see, for the past 25 years, our company's been called Foster and Easley Sports Group. Well, Kenny Easley is really a quiet partner right now. He's really not even involved anymore. Well, I'm hoping in about 10 to 15 years from now, Foster's not going to be involved that much anymore either. And I'm going to have young, new agents coming in and taking over my company for me. Yet, I want to step out, keep the company alive because it is well respected in the NFL, and just keep it alive. And just when I retire, I don't want the doors to close. I want to be able to educate a young man or two that can come in and do my work for me, and it's still be my company, and it'll still take a piece of the pie. And so that's what I kind of wised up to a few years ago. So now we've changed the name to RAIN, Sports Management Group. And but you'll always see Foster and Easley associated with it for the next 2 or 3 years, just because the NFL does not know who RAIN Sports Management Group is. They know Foster and Easley. So that's why I'm doing a marketing change right now. Yes?
Have you ever been approached for like a sponsorship deal for one of your athletes by like a company such as Nike or
Oh, yeah. Yeah, all the time.
Talk to me or tell us all about maybe like
Commercial work?
how that kind of contract and how that kind of
Yeah. Well, it depends on the player. First and foremost, you got to have a kid that's talented. That's a kind of a higher profile young man. But just for instance, Washington State guys in the last few years, Jeff Toole. Go to eBay.com and you can see it all. Jeff Toole, Dayon, Marquise, Vince have very good trading card deals. That's kind of where a lot of the money is right now. Vince Maley was one of the first players I've had really since Napoleon Kaufman that liked Adidas. Looking at that piece of paper right there, that's an Adidas ad right there of Napoleon Kaufman. Well, Adidas they make a different shoe than Nike. Adidas are made for soccer players, so they're thinner. And your typical football player has a wider foot. Well, Vince has a very thin foot, so he loved the feel of Adidas cleats. So I contacted Adidas and let them know that, and Adidas only signed 16 players before the combine. And I don't know if you heard that gimmick that Adidas, I thought it was marketing genius. Have you heard of what they did? They signed like 16 players, and they said the fastest guy, the fastest athlete, that is an Adidas guy. So you can't be a Nike guy. If you're an Adidas guy, meaning you're under contract with Adidas, and you run a fast time, they give you a Porsche. And they're all cheetahs. So like Vince has these really cool cleats, and they got cheetahs on the side of them. They're gold. They're very cool looking. Well, Vince, right up Vince's alley. He wanted Adidas even to start off with. Obviously, Vince is not the fastest guy just because he's so big. But I just thought that was marketing brilliance, what Adidas did there, because it's an Under Armour show. The NFL Combine, Adidas just took the show. But for instance, Vince Mailey just signed an $85,000 contract with Adidas. I approached them. So I just contact their NFL rep, and I said, this is who I am, this is who I'm representing, and he's interested in your product. And that's all it took. And then Vince just signed a $69,000 deal with Panini trading cards, where he basically gets $3 a signature. And he wanted, it was like 23,000 cards, or I don't know what the number was, but I said, you sure your hand can handle this? He goes, oh yeah. You know, because these guys that come from, you know, scholarship checks of $1,000 a month, if that, and in an hour they can make $50,000 signing their name, sign me up. So Vince has a Panini trading card deal, he has an Upper Deck trading card deal, and a Fleer trading card deal. And that totals about $100,000 to $150,000 for that alone. So yeah, we do that, you know, but besides that, there really is not a lot of commercial opportunity for guys. You know, depending on where they're drafted, there might be car deals where they could go and do an appearance at a dealership, and they'll get a car for the season for free to drive, but they have to do like 1 or 2 appearances, so those are pretty easy to do. But you don't get T-Mobile commercials unless you're a Super Bowl MVP, and those are pretty rare. Yes?
Kind of going off that, I don't know how you can do this, but let's say like the Seahawks sign Russell Wilson for a $15 million contract. Can they give him an endorsement deal, like give him like price to his salary? Like,
You guys are getting sick of that. What's that?
So like, if Russell Wilson, like Tom comes to him and says, I'll give you this giant endorsement deal, just take $10 million from the Seahawks, so that way it doesn't get capped. Can they do that?
We're going to find out. That's what.
Look at Marshawn.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, I don't. You have to wait and see what the paperwork says, but that's what I'd do. You know, I'm sure there's some sort of a, you know, what would that be? Racketeering. You know, there's got to be some issues of fraud in there that the NFL will not want to have. But man, if I was the Seahawks, I'd be working that angle, no doubt. You know, instead of paying a guy $15 million, you pay him 10, and you get a $5 million Microsoft. Works for me. I'd take it if I was the agent. No doubt, it's a better deal because, you know, Microsoft's going to pay and be good. Yes, I actually met with Vernon Adams yesterday at Eastern Washington. Who's going to, you don't know if you know his story. Vernon Adams is a quarterback at Eastern Washington University, and he just transferred to Oregon, and it's interesting to see how this is going to pan out. It could be wonderful. It could be he may not play at all next year. He has to graduate still, and he's not doing too well in the class. So we're going to see if he's even going to graduate. If he doesn't graduate, he can't go to Oregon because you have to graduate to transfer. So it's going to be a really interesting story here in about 2 months. But yeah, he was promised the moon. He was promised internship. He had dinner with Phil Knight. Talk about recruiting. Got to cut that part out. But yes, it'll be interesting to see how. But yeah, I think there's creative ways to do it, but it's got to be pretty hush hush because the NFL will not approve it. Yes.
Do you represent any female athletes, and if you
I do.
How's the game different? Like, how do you approach it?
Well, there's not a lot of professional sports for women, but WNBA. And I represent, again, I have daughters, and my wife one day told me that we had too much testosterone coming through the house with clients. And so she wanted to see if I could represent a woman. And in 2005, the Seattle Storm won the WNBA. And I just, for the fun of it, sent marketing information to a woman named Betty Lennox, who was the MVP of the championship series, and I signed her. And so I worked with Betty for like 6 years, and then about 4 years ago, she retired. And I was actually on a flight from Seattle to Spokane, and I sat next to a woman, and she had a computer out, and she was watching basketball. And I didn't know who she was, and we just struck up a conversation. I told her who I was. She was listening to me. I was listening to her. Well, it happened to be that she was the head coach for Stanford, Stanford women's program. And when the plane landed, I noticed these, 7-foot women getting off of the plane with me, and they were going to play Gonzaga. And we had a conversation. That was about it. And like 3 years later, she calls me and she says, "I have a female player here that she felt needed an agency that gave a damn and that was going to be there for her. She needed attention. She needed to be sure that she wasn't just signed and thrown against the wall." And that was a girl named Candace Wiggins. And Candace Wiggins, I don't know if you know who she is, but I think she holds the NCAA record for most points ever scored in a college career. And she went to Stanford. And she now plays. She just signed. You guys need to. This is what you need. I am very socially inept when it comes to marketing. But I now have a Twitter, is that right? Twitter page, and Instagram. So you got to follow me now, okay? Let me see my Instagram is rain_sports, and my Twitter is @sportsmanagers. So you got to put that on. That should be a test question. Okay. And so Candace is a wonderful girl. She's a wonderful role model for my daughter. It's fun for my girls when her team comes and plays the Storm that we go out to dinner with her. And so, yes, I represent one professional woman. And on the flip side, in the past few years, there have become quite a few women becoming agents. I think just last year was the first time a woman represented a first-round draft pick in the NFL draft last year. And so there are a lot more women getting into the profession as well. Did that answer your question? Okay. Yes? You sound like an athlete. No, I don't do that. No one knows. No one knows. My class this year have a safety from Minnesota. He was a one-off. His name's Cedric Thompson. He should be about a 5th-round draft pick. I represent a tackle out of Eastern Washington named Jake Rogers, who was a transfer. He was a Washington State athlete. Jake Rogers should be a late-round draft pick, 6 or 7. And Quayshawn Buckley out of Idaho, a defensive tackle. He should be about a 5th or 6th round pick. And then Vince Maley. It's hard to tell on him because some teams love him and some teams don't. He could. If he runs a great 40, he could go into maybe 2nd round. If he doesn't, I'm thinking 4th round. There's a big swing for him, yeah. But he's a big physical receiver. He's the biggest receiver at the combine at 224 pounds when most of your receivers are 195 to 205. Yeah, kind of like Dayon Buchanan last year. Dayon was a huge safety at 218 pounds when most of your safeties were 195. So, yes?
Well, let's say one of your athletes doesn't get drafted.
If a player doesn't get drafted, well, within 24 hours after the draft, you're hoping and praying and calling teams for free agency opportunities. Yep. But within 24 hours of the draft, camps are full. Teams are not signing anybody else. They're done. So when that stage comes, then in my world, my plan B is the CFL. So then if I have a player that I think might fall through the cracks, I already contact the CFL teams, giving them a heads up, saying I represent Joe Blow, and just letting you know if he falls through the crack, I'm going to be looking your way. So the CFL is plan B. Then there's arena leagues. You know, I'm not a fan of arena football just because it's not conducive to health. You know, you're running a route and you get clipped in the waist running out of bounds from, you know, they're played in hockey rinks, basically. There's no out of bounds. You hit a wall, you could do some serious damage. So I don't love arena, but some players just don't want to give it up. And so you help them any way you can. If they want to play arena, then they play arena. Yes?
With as competitive as the industry is, what have you found is the most effective way of like maintaining relationships and keeping your clients?
Just caring for them, just having a relationship with them. Most agents sign their players and they only hear from their agent until the fee's late. And that's the truth. In my world, I just, you know, I make an effort. I try my best to go to every player. I spend a weekend with them during the season. So, like for instance, I went to Buffalo last year, and I usually fly in on a Friday. I spend time with the player Friday, Saturday. They're locked down Saturday night. I go to the game. I go out with them after the game, and then Monday I usually fly home. So during the football season, I'm busy. I'm gone every weekend. But so I do that with them. But then, you know, it's just relationships. We have an office on Camino Island as well. So in the summer, I live there, July and August, with my family, and I shrimp and crab every day. And I have got players coming in, and we have fun. And it's just the choice that I made early on with Kenny that I didn't want to be the biggest agency out there. And last year, I turned down 23 NFL prospects that wanted me to be their agent, and I said no thank you to them. And because I just want to work with guys that fit our mold and I feel have great careers. And so because of that, if I was representing 10 guys a year and I got 50 clients, financially that'd be wonderful. But I'd be losing clients every year because I couldn't take care of them all unless I hired 3 more me. And now I'm running that risk, which I don't want to get into. So I've just kept it small, and it's worked. I'm doing well. I always often say, if I get an athlete with anything over the shoulder pads, I'll sign them. Because usually, if an athlete doesn't want the glitz and glamour, because what I compete with on an annual basis is big name agents. Well, my story to these guys is it's really great to say your agent represents Peyton Manning. But the problem with that is your agent represents Peyton Manning. And who are you? So why be one of 85 when you can be one of 15? And it's not like you're losing talented representation. I've done some of the biggest and most creative contracts in the NFL. So we keep it small. And just because of that, I have the time to call them and text them on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. For instance, June 26th to the 29th, I'm going to Puerto Vallarta with Marquise Wilson, Jeff Toole, and Dan Buchanan to go golf, fish, have a few beers, and relax. So it's just that kind of stuff that keeps them close. Yes?
How was Marquise after his injury last week? Is he doing pretty well?
Oh, he did. I don't know if you guys know, but I should have been prepared. I got pictures I should be throwing up here. Marquise Wilson, last year preseason, he broke his collarbone in 3 places. So he actually had a bone floating. It was pretty tough. And he did it in preseason, not in the game. He was just stretching out for a catch. He plays for the Chicago Bears, stretching out for the catch and just fell weird, and it just snapped in 3 places. So they put a 7-inch titanium strap on his collarbone and 9 screws, which are there forever. And in the NFL, if you go on IR, if you know what that means, injured reserve, if you go on IR, you're done for the season. You can't come back. Well, the new collective bargaining agreement made an exception to that. You can designate 1 player to come back off of IR. They designated Marquise Wilson. And it made me upset because I didn't want him to come back. That was a serious injury, and he's a receiver. I did not want him to come back last year, but they they designate him to come back. And Marquise, any great player wants to play, no matter how damaged they are. And Marquise came back, and with 3 weeks to go, I think it was 3 games to go, Brandon Marshall, it was just perfect timing. Brandon Marshall got hurt. Marquise Wilson came in and started the last 3 games for the Chicago Bears. And he got his first touchdown last year. So, and now Brandon's gone. Marquise is the starting right receiver for the Chicago Bears next year. So he's looking really good. Yes.
How does it work? Obviously, you mentioned bias.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had an experience, or how does the process work if you do not want to represent the agency that you want to represent?
I don't know personally, but you just terminate them. Yeah, you can just like an agent can be fired, you could fire a player if they're not listening to you, or they're not doing what you ask them to do, or you just think they're a risk. Or, the thing in my business is I've said no to a lot of incredibly talented athletes that have had very successful NFL careers, but I've made a choice not to represent some bad character young men because I don't want to be on the cover of the sports page newspaper saying, "Oh, he's not a rapist." Because that's what happens. You see agents protecting their players at all ends, and I would do that for any of my clients. But what parent is going to send their son to me if this is my clientele? And so I've really made a strong effort to say no to young men that are risk guys, in my opinion. And it was not the financially smart thing to do, but again, there's not a whole lot of agents out there that have been doing this for 25 years because you have a burnout factor pretty quick. It's so competitive that in time you're going to do something wrong and you're going to get caught and you're out of the game. I don't know how I've done it, but I've been so blessed that I have kept my nose clean. I don't buy players, even though I know it happens on a regular basis. That's why I don't get first-round draft picks every year. On a side note, I was at a training facility this last January, and there's an agent there that represents 3 or 4 first-round picks every year. And he's from the East Coast, and I just kind of approached him, and I said, I'm not your competition, okay? How do you do this? What do you do to get all the, and he had like 80-some players, and he was brutally honest to me. He said, what I do is I wait. I start a relationship with the young man through his final year of playing football. And so he knows who I am, and he knows who my clients are, so he knows I'm a good agent. And then I let all the agents go through them, and giving them their spiel. And at the very end, I walk in and I ask him how much it's going to cost. He says a first-round draft pick goes for about $85,000. So he pays players. Now that's illegal. Even though you're not an NCAA athlete anymore. That's illegal in the NFL eyes. So how they get around that is they couch it by saying, I will give you an $85,000 marketing advancement, and you can pay me back later. So that's how they do it. But that's how, I can tell you next year, the first round draft pick in the 2016 draft, half of them are already purchased. Yeah, it's sad. It's a big argument that agents always have with one another. But those agents are great for 5 years, and then they do something wrong. So they recycle pretty quick. So that's my competition. And when you don't buy players, you don't get first rounders every year, like us.